Last week, former Manchester United defender and current Mark from Peep Show to Jamie Carragher's Jeremy from Peep Show, Gary Neville, called for an immediate transfer embargo to be put on Premier League players moving to the Saudi Arabian Pro League. This plea for frankly unprecedented action came in the wake of a seventh unwanted Chelsea player reportedly agreeing terms with the league and being set to depart the club. The Premier League should put an instant embargo on transfers to Saudi Arabia to ensure the integrity of the game isn't being damaged, he told BBC Sport. Transfers should be halted until you look into the ownership structure at Chelsea and whether there are beneficial transfer dealings that are improper. The implication made by both him and now innumerable others is that Chelsea have struck up a relationship with Saudi League authorities in order to turn their squad crisis into a financial opportunity. But is there any truth in that? This is the controversial Chelsea and Saudi Arabia relationship explained. So, first off, the size of Chelsea's current first-team squad is absurd. Assembled at never-before-seen expense by several different managers and even two different owners, they found themselves plummeting under the weight of it to a 12th-placed finish in last season's Premier League. It derailed Thomas Tuchel's grand plans, stopped Graham Potter from even getting started on his, and left Frank Lampard with one of the worst managerial runs in top-flight history. Whatever ideas Mauricio Pochettino had following his appointment, they are all relatively pointless until this first issue is addressed. The problem Chelsea faced then was not only trying to offload as many as 20 first-team players this summer, but doing so and getting reasonable market value for them. Some players like Kai Havertz and Mason Mount are highly sought after by rival clubs, but the bulk of the others have displayed neither form nor fitness recently and would be near impossible to recoup the outlay for. N'Golo Kante, Hakim Ziyech, Edouard Mendy, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang and Kalidou Koulibaly have all, for one reason or another, had poor seasons, but all are also the wrong side of 30 with contracts that are winding down. That's over £140 million spent to bring them in, with barely a fraction of that likely to come back when moving them on. And that's if any sort of buyer could even be found in the first place. But then, something amazing happened. Hot on the heels of their purchase of Karim Benzema, Saudi Pro League champions Al Ittihad were reported to be in advanced discussions for N'Golo Kante, despite him managing only 7 league starts with fitness issues last season. A great pickup, the world declared, with Kante available on a free this summer and rivals Arsenal reported to be the only other club circling. But then, something else amazing happened. Cristiano Ronaldo's Al Nassr side were reported to be in negotiations with Chelsea over a £15 million deal for Hakim Ziyech. What a stroke of good fortune. Another player potentially moving on, and this time they're even likely to get a fair chunk of his initial fee back. Great business for a player who only made 6 league starts last season. But then, something else amazing happened, and something else amazing happened, and something else amazing happened after that, and so on and so forth, until Aubameyang, Koulibaly, Mendy, Hudson-Odoi and even the returning Romelu Lukaku were all reportedly considering deals from clubs within the Saudi League, with Chelsea standing to suddenly and very fortunately receive a major windfall out of what was otherwise a financial black hole. So, what's the problem? The Saudi League is an ambitious one looking to improve its standing through the acquisition of much higher reputation players. Identifying a club in Chelsea's situation, one desperately needing to offload a number of big-name stars in the autumns of their careers, seems like a very shrewd place to do their shopping. The issue though, and what Gary Neville was implying, was that there was potentially more to this than meets the eye, and it all relates to the supposed business relationship between Chelsea owner Todd Boehly and the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund PIF. As we've mentioned on the channel in our recent video exploring the long-term ambitions of the Saudi League, there was a hugely significant ownership change with the top clubs last season. The big four, Al Ittihad, Al Nassr, Al Hilal and Al Ahly, were all taken under state ownership by PIF, the same organisation that acquired Newcastle United. This then gave them access to the country's near $500 billion investment fund without the financial fair play constraints that their partners in the northeast are currently subjected to. Hence the signing of Benzema, the offers made to Salah and Messi, and the developing situation with all of Chelsea's players. That is where the money for this is coming from. But PIF isn't merely an organisation that invests in sports. Their remit is to drastically expand the financial and cultural influence of Saudi Arabia as a major player on the world stage, and diversify the country's economy away from being so reliant on oil. They've got interests, and indeed they've got money in virtually everything, including Clear Lake Capital, an American private equity firm who specialize in acquiring companies it sees as having significant growth potential, working with their existing staff to maximize that growth, and then selling the company for an enormous profit. One such project of theirs you may have heard of is women's clothing label Ashley Stewart. Another one is Chelsea Football Club. Following the fire sale conducted by Roman Abramovich in the fallout of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, ownership of Chelsea passed to the trio of Todd Boehly, Behrad Eghbali and Jose Feliciano. The former you're likely familiar with, but the latter two are the original founders and current managing directors of Clearlake Capital. Not only that, but about 2/3 of the money required for the acquisition of the club came from the company. So does that mean that, as well as Newcastle United, the Saudi state also owns a part of Chelsea? Well, no, that's not how private equity firms work, even if potentially some of their money could have been used in the acquisition. There is no question here of a conflict of interest between the two clubs' ownership models. The Premier League even obtained written assurances last year that PIF were not involved in the move in any way and are said to be entirely satisfied with the answers they got. What is alleged, however, is that such is PIF's involvement with Clearlake and the money the company would stand to either make or lose through their ownership of Chelsea, that they are proactively helping them to flout FFP restrictions and inject major new investment through the purchasing of unwanted players at inflated prices. Some would say that's financial doping, and by some, it's currently the fans of the clubs that have already benefited from Chelsea's recent demise and have no interest in seeing them get their house in order. Certainly not if they did so sufficiently to challenge at the top of the league again. But is there actually any truth in that? Well, yes and no. Yes, definitely PIF are invested in Clearlake, but given the way the company is structured, it's almost certain to be a fraction of the overall financial makeup. Likewise, it'll be an investment to PIF that accounts for only a tiny fraction again of their overall operation. While they're almost certainly involved with each other, it's not an involvement that would merit this sort of market manipulation. Likewise, while Todd Boehly's relationship with PIF is undoubtedly making for some very smooth negotiations between Chelsea and teams in the Saudi Pro League, there's virtually no difference between the business being conducted here and that being conducted by any other club. Real Madrid and Wolves have already sold players to the league, and Man City, Liverpool, PSG, Crystal Palace, Arsenal, Barcelona and Man United all have players who are the subject of bids. Finally, there are rules about paying over the odds. Every single transfer in English football that is over £1 million is subject to an audit of sorts to ensure it's reflective of fair market value. So even if there was some sort of under-the-table agreement between two clubs to exchange enormous sums of cash under the masquerade of a transfer, it would still need to be the going rate. The truth is, this is an arrangement that's come about at the absolute perfect time for both parties. Chelsea need to trim their squad and rake back some of the money splurged last season, and the Saudi League needs a batch of big-name players who'll be open to a lucrative payday away from the more traditionally attractive leagues. It's bad news for Chelsea's rivals, undoubtedly, but the inferences that there's something untoward going on seem to ignore the boring reality of the situation. Chelsea have something the Saudi League needs, and the Saudi League just so happens to be one of the few places that have the financial power to actually afford it. Now, whether or not things like this should be perfectly legal under the current rules is another question entirely, but regardless, this almost certainly is.